rapidly expanding its nuclear and missile capability under the so-called Supreme Leader.
North Korea possibly making new preparations for war by simulating attack responses. State media in North Korea reporting that citizens are having rare blackout exercises and mass evacuation drills. Meanwhile, the U.S. flew a nuclear-capable B-2 stealth bomber over the Pacific this weekend in that region, just days ahead of the president's visit to Asia.
New word, North Korea is getting ready for war. Reports it conducted mass evacuation and blackout drills. Jillian Turner, former national security staffer under Presidents George Bush and Obama, Fox News contributor. Jillian, good morning to you. A lot of breaking news, but we do want to get to this. So they conducted these drills not in Pyongyang, the capital, but in the countryside in smaller towns. What would that indicate?
Right. It indicates that the North and the regime there is taking the threat of military force from the United States credibly. Secretary Mattis was fairly unequivocal in his comments there on Saturday in the region. He said, you guys are conducting illegal missile tests, you're conducting an illegal nuclear program, and we're not going to allow that to continue for much longer.
Yeah, apparently they were telling people to practice turning out the lights so the enemy cannot see your house. Okay, now in the meantime, you've got B-2.
Feels like it's 1991.
Agreed. It's either that or it's the Korean leadership trying to gin up more fear in their own people and more hatred toward the U.S. Keep your eye on that part of the story. Yeah. But the B-2 stealth bombers made some flyovers in the Pacific. Put that together with the aircraft carriers that have moved ahead of the president's visit there later in the week.
Well, so Secretary Mattis echoed something on Saturday that President Trump has been saying for weeks, if not months, which is that, look, we're not taking options off the table when it comes to dealing with this regime. I've got a whole panoply of military options ginned up. I'm hoping not to have to use them offensively, but we will if we need to. And I think that the military exercises that the United States has been conducting in the region with its allies, like South Korea, are having a gradual sort of psychological impact on the regime. That coupled with President Trump's rhetoric. So we're at a point where we at least know they're taking the threat seriously. Maybe some of what they're doing by conducting these nuclear blackout drills is also what you mentioned. A little bit of showmanship, a little bit of ginning people up and making them scared. It could be a combination of both.
I think it's adding to the intrigue for this trip in Asia. Yeah. I mean, this is really going to be something else. A 12-day visit, Japan, China, South Korea.
And the biggest question is still up for grabs, which is whether the president is going to travel to the DMZ, the demilitarized zone in between North and South. Over the weekend, I talked to Gordon Chang, and he was saying, you know, one of the real risks here is to the president's personal safety.
An extraordinary act of defiance. North Korea releasing pictures of Kim Jong-un inspecting what it claims is a hydrogen bomb that can be mounted and launched by an intercontinental ballistic missile.
We're told the Pentagon has now sent B-2 stealth bombers and its third aircraft carrier, the USS Nimitz, to the North Korean region this weekend. North Korea reportedly prepping by conducting evacuation drills and blackout exercises while also releasing the statement that they are a nuclear power and not worried at all by President Trump's threats to destroy them. The president headed to South Korea next week, forcing many to ask if Kim Jong-un will conduct one of his famous missile tests while the president's in town. Is there an end in sight? And will any of it be peaceful? I hope so. But let me discuss with former CIA officer and the president of Diligence LLC, the very diligent Mike Baker. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks very much, Kennedy. Thank you.
So let's discuss. What do you think the chances are that Kim Jong-un pops off and sends one of his missiles into the sky?
Well, let's see. Personally, I'm hoping it doesn't happen. Obviously, millions and millions of others are. My wife's over in Tokyo right now for the next couple of weeks, so I think his minions have advised him not to do anything to personally piss me off. But I think that it is a possibility, and it may be more than a possibility, maybe likely, because the regime in the past have either fired off a missile or conducted a nuke test around an event, around an activity, whether that activity is because they're feeling disrespected or whether it's because something else going on globally. So Trump's visit to the region including to South Korea,
we saw that, by the way,
could well prompt this.
We saw that when the president of China visited the United States, when the United States and South Korea conducted joint military exercises, and with the president, you know, potentially visiting the DMZ and being in the region. Kim Jong-un is a waddling tantrum. I would say walking, but he's gouty and slow. And all
you know what
he
is?
wants
He's a todpot. He's a toddler and a despot put together. He's a todpot, and he's getting ready to throw his. Todpot, yeah, exactly. And maybe I could patent that. Yeah. But here's the problem: is that Secretary Mattis has now been up to the DMZ. He's been over there. This is his second visit to South Korea and to Japan, which shows the importance of it to this administration. And Secretary Mattis is basically just laying out the facts. I mean, there's been some pushback in the media saying, "Oh, you might be inflaming this issue by talking about the threat of escalation of a nuclear attack." Yeah. But the reality is, he's saying, "Look, these are the facts on the ground." We're at this point now because of North Korea's own doing, because of their 20-plus years of bypassing sanctions, of paying no attention to common sense, continuing to build their nuclear and ballistic missile capabilities with the help of the Iranians, the Chinese, and the Russians. This is where we are now. So we can either accept the idea of a nuclear-armed North Korea.
Okay, but that's my question. Will the United States and our allies, particularly in the region, South Korea and Japan, will they accept that reality?
Well, so far, no. I mean, Secretary Mattis said he can see no conditions under which the U.S. would accept that. So if we set that off the table, and you know, anybody in their right mind would not want Kim Jong-un to have a closet full of nuclear weapons, you know, sitting on top of ballistic missiles capable of reaching the U.S. So if we set that off the table, that means what else can we do? What are our options? We've had 2+ decades of failed diplomatic effort and half-hearted sanctions. So maybe that's not the answer. Maybe the answer is what we're trying to do: enhance sanctions, keeping a great deal of pressure on the Chinese and others to actually this time adhere to those sanctions. And possibly our only other options are we have to think through and prepare for, and hope that we never have to use it, a military response. Or we work with the Chinese, and here's a thought: maybe the Chinese realize that now is the time to enact some type of regime change. And if anybody can do it, the Chinese can.
Absolutely right.
A meeting between key officials from Washington and Pyongyang has been abruptly canceled. Hopes were high that U.S. State Department Special Representative for North Korea Policy Joseph Yun and senior North Korean diplomat Choi Sun-hee could discuss ways to make some positive steps towards dialogue between the two nations. Unfortunately, according to Japan's Tokyo Broadcasting System, the anticipated unofficial event in Oslo was canceled by the reclusive regime. Citing a diplomatic source, it reported the communist state blamed the Seoul-Washington combined military exercises. The two high-profile figures have met before. Back in May, they held talks on the return of American detainees in North Korea.
U.S. Vice President Mike Pence vowed to keep economic and diplomatic pressure on North Korea to make it abandon its nuclear and missile programs. While touring a nuclear weapons base in North Dakota, Pence said the U.S. will use overwhelming military power to defend themselves or its allies against attacks. Pence said America's enemies should never doubt the capabilities of the U.S. armed forces. Minot Air Force Base is home to dozens of B-52 bombers and ICBM sites and is the only U.S. base capable of conducting nuclear strikes by both planes and missiles.